Hello and welcome back to my channel, Thrifty Day. My name is Leah. I'm the creator behind Thrifty Day. Today's episode is going to be a tag flip, the first peek of my Halloween Junk Journal Challenge tag flip that I've been working on for the past week. Today's theme is in the attic. If you wanted more information about the Halloween Junk Journal Challenge hosted by Kia Creates and Inspiring Journals, check out the description. In the meantime, here is my current tag flip. We are on day 5, so let me show you the first 4 days. Day 1 was like the title page, and so I actually just used this tag that I had already made and sent out to some of my Patreon members, and I put the challenge themes on the back. Day 2 was autumn vision board, and so I created a little mini tag vision board in the journal collection theme that I'm creating this month, which is mushrooms and butterflies. And those beautiful digitals are actually by Tanya Samuels, and I will link her information and Etsy shop down below. The day 3 was fortune teller, super simple. I just added this fortune teller card I got at Disneyland. And day 4 was spooky cinema, so of course I chose Nightmare Before Christmas. I added that press penny and a little bit of writing on the back. So today is in the attic, and I'm very excited because I have so many scraps left over from my most recent Patreon ephemera kits that I thought I would use some. I sent these in a tag pack for my Patreon ephemera kit members. Lots of little Tim Holtz ephemera pieces. I have some lace scraps. I also have some metal hardware. That is actually from Your Creative Studio. And I have this teeny tiny vintage key that I've been hoarding. I found this vintage key at an estate sale, and I've been hanging on to it for probably a year. I just love it so much. I also have some little Tim Holtz paper clips and tiny clips. I bought them knowing I was going to make this tag flip, and I'm just dying to use one. So I also have this very vintage sheet music I'm excited to use because the coloring and everything is just perfect. So I'm actually going to start by adding the sheet music as a base onto the back of that spooky portrait. It's also by Tim Holtz, and I got mine at Joann's. I'm going to use a whole array of glues in this particular video. So if you were looking for glue techniques or what glues I use and why I use them, this is actually a really good video for that. And that definitely wasn't my intention, but I'm so glad because it's fun to show you why I use certain glues and which ones I use. So the first one I used was PVA. It's great for paper. It dries quickly, it's flexible, it's clear, it's wonderful. So I do use that for a lot of my vintage paper. I'm going to put my really old cutting board down just to protect my workspace. So PVA glue backed on that spooky portrait by Tim Holtz. And now I'm just going to start layering. Tim Holtz has so many amazing little bits of ephemera. Lately, I'm very obsessed with Tim Holtz. I don't know. I think it's because I watched his most recent Christmas like showcase or whatever here on YouTube. And I was just very inspired. So I've just been loving using Tim Holtz. So I have lots of his little bits of ephemera. I'm going to ink it all up, also using Tim Holtz Distress ink. And I'm going to start layering all of these pieces down. There is no rhyme or reason. There is no right or wrong. I'm inking up the edges just in the thought of whatever showing I do want to look aged. I don't need to add a lot of ink to the sheet music, however, because it is just very naturally aged already, which is kind of nice. But where I cut it, it's not so aged. Another really great tip and use for this Tim Holtz Distress ink is it covers a lot of mistakes. Like, so if you don't cut perfectly straight, or if you wrote something wrong, or if your glue is kind of gloppy, that Distress ink really covers up a lot of those little mess ups. And so it helps you be very forgiving in your crafting. And like I said, you can find all of these Tim Holtz products at Michael's and Joann's. My Joann's happens to have a much bigger selection. So that's where I find most of my pieces. I'm also going to use some of this sort of vintagey looking paper, and it is actually by Your Creative Studio. I love Your Creative Studio. They always send a lot of very usable paper ephemera that is perfect for layering and decoupaging. So I remembered I had this really cute little pad from my last subscription box, so I ripped a piece of that out as well. I don't know if I'm going to use all of these pieces. I just wanted to have them all handy so that if I did, I could just throw them down. So now what you're watching me do is just sort of haphazardly put pieces of paper down. This is a really fun theme because I could just sort of use anything that looks sort of old and vintage, and I think it definitely fits into the vibe of In the Attic. These journal prompts can be articulated in your journal or whatever you're using in any way. There's no right or wrong. And I'm having such a fun time actually making this tag flip. I've never made a full big tag flip like this before. And so I'm really excited. So day 5, it's already looking nice and full. And so I'm very excited. I'm also going to add the sticker. I believe it's also from your creative studio, and it just fit the vibe perfect. It's sort of vintagey looking flowers. And this stamp is also from your creative studio. Your creative studio really blends in really well with your Tim Holtz products. So that's another perk to your creative studio. I will link all of their information down below as well. And fun fact, my next YouTube will be the Your Creative Studio box for, I believe, the month of May, and I will be using it for one of my tags here. I haven't filmed it yet, but it is coming. So now I'm just trimming off those edges that are overhanging the portrait, and I'm just going to keep adding. I'm going to keep layering. I'm going to keep adding a little bit of glue until this looks as vintagey as possible. I will also take a quick moment to ask you to hit that like button if you're enjoying this video, and if you're new, please subscribe. We'd love to have you here. So the really fun part of this tag flip is, as you can tell, this spooky portrait by Tim Holtz is not a tag. It wasn't necessarily meant to be a tag, but I am using it as a tag. And I'm trying to be very intentional when I create to use items that may not necessarily be tags. And so this is one of those days. And these are Spooky Silhouettes by Tim Holtz. I had put these into the tag pack for my Patreon members. If you're interested in joining my Patreon, spaces fill very quickly. I do think there are a few available, and I am looking at supplies for this month to see if I can add more, but I have linked all that information down below. I go live every couple of days. I have tutorials. I post digitals. It's a nice little crafty community, and we'd love to have you there too. So I'm just going to use that little Tim Holtz paper clip to put that spooky silhouette right on the end. I think she looks perfect there. She's so lovely. And now I'm going to use some of this lace. If you know me, you know I love lace. I love all colors of lace. And I especially love using this sort of vanilla colored lace. Now here is a different sort of glue. It is fabric tack, and I'm going to use a little bit of fabric tack just to glue that lace scrap right to the corner. I'm going to actually use it again to put some more lace scraps down at the bottom. I use fabric tack because truly it is the best glue for any sort of fabric or lace. And then you'll see in a moment, I'm actually going to go over that lace with a little bit of Mod Podge. Now that's not necessary. I'm not adding the Mod Podge because the fabric tack won't hold. I'm adding it because I like the way it looks over lace. I think it gives a very sort of vintage vibe. And so that step isn't entirely necessary, but I think you'll see in the end what I mean. It just gives it a very finished vintage look. So while I understand that all these glues are a little bit pricey, I do think it is good to have a whole variety of glues in your arsenal because you never know when you're going to need them. So now that I have those scrap pieces on right where I want them, I'm just going to trim off the excess, and I will move on to the next few steps. I don't know that I intended for this tag to be as involved as it was, but truly, I just had a good time creating. And I think that that is the objective of these journal challenges, is just to have fun and be creative. And I think sometimes as journal makers and YouTubers, we're very focused on creating content to help others, but sometimes it's just fun to create for yourself. And this is one of those moments. So I'm just using a paintbrush and I'm adding a little bit of that Mod Podge. I'm even using my finger just to sort of make sure it gets into those little crevices. I just like the look. Again, it's not a necessary step to adhere the lace. For me, it's all about the way it looks visually when it dries. It's just something that is pleasing to my eye, but again, not necessary to make the lace actually stick to the paper. Now I'm also going to add that little piece of age tape that I had on the little spooky silhouettes. I just think, again, one more little sort of vintage bit that adds another layer and adds a little bit of a sort of spooky, vintagey, interesting quality to this tag. I also added some of that distress ink to a little oval label. That oval label came in a box from Your Creative Studio, a whole little box full of labels. And it's important to me to have those little tiny labels because I am trying to write the date on every tag. So I'm going to write 10/5 on here. It is also my brother's birthday, so shout out to my brother Manny. Happy birthday. And I also thought it'd be fun to add that little vintage key. I think it looks perfect. Anything you can add to mix medias, whether it's metal, paper, paste, lace, fabric, add it. I think it will truly make your project very, very interesting. So the next little bit I'm going to add is this Gilder's paste wax. And I'm just going to add it to the front of the portrait, mainly to make it look a little more vintage, a little more used, but also to add just a little bit of pop, because right now it's just a picture. And so it just adds another little bit of something before I add those metal hardware corners. Now, this is a little picture. Usually I would probably add 4 corners, but since it's a smaller, picture that I'm using for this tag flip, I'm actually just going to use 2, and I'm going to put them in either corner. And to add them onto this paper or cardstock, I'm actually just going to use fabric tack. If I were going to adhere these onto a journal of some sort, I would use E6000. If you were interested in that process, please look at my most recent journal tutorial. I will link it down below. It's my mushroom journal, and I show how I add these exact photo corners onto an actual journal. The process is much more involved because you never want those to come off of your journal, especially when you're moving your journal around and working in it. You want to make sure you're using an adhesive that is going to really stay on there with like the glue and strength of God. So, but since I'm just adding these to paper, I use fabric tack, and that's going to be more than enough adhesive for this particular project. And we are coming to the end. I'm so happy with how this came out. It was so fun to create. And like I said, lately I've been really into Tim Holtz products. And if you haven't watched his like holiday preview for 2023, I highly recommend it because he has like makers, and they make all these very interesting holiday products with his products, and it's really fun to watch, and it's nice and long. If you're like me, you like watching nice long chatty YouTubes, so that's a really fun one to watch. I'm just going to write the date in that little label, and then I'm going to add a hole right in the top so that I could add this tag onto my tag flip. I had briefly thought about perhaps adding an eyelet, but actually after I looked, I realized that it wasn't really necessary. You weren't really going to be able to see it. And honestly, I just felt like that eyelet was competing with the metal hardware. So I just decided, never mind. And now I'm just going to put it right onto my tag flip. It's exactly what I wanted. It's super perfect and super busy. And I'm just so excited. I love the whole like kind of chaotic, attic-y, vintagey vibe. So now it's really simple. I just added onto that brass tone ring, and there's day 1, day 2, day 3, which was super simple, day 4, and now day 5, and it is absolutely perfect. And of course I had to use that portrait with the dog. You all know me. I am a dog person. So here is an up close. I hope you enjoyed this video. I was really excited to make this particular tag, so I thought it would be really fun to make a YouTube so that you guys could watch the process. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button. Check out my Patreon. I'd love to have you there. It's a wonderful way to support. It's also a wonderful way to receive monthly mail from me. Every tier does receive mail. So thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a great weekend. Bye, everyone.